All right, guys, so today what we're focusing on is attacks from the mount position, okay? So here's what we're gonna be doing. We're all gonna be focusing from the high mount as opposed to the low mount. High mount meaning I'm up here, my knees are squeezing, I'm trying to have myself off of his hips. I wanna be a little bit higher like this, heels squeezing on his hips, trying to keep everything like a vice. The low mount would be over here, when I'm down here in this kind of position, all right? So the attacks are gonna be different. So when I'm up here in the high mount, one of the main ways I like to attack my opponent is with the key lock. Now, first before I tell you the way I wanna do it, I wanna tell you a way that, like the way I was taught to do it, that I think it's not as effective, so that you can kind of see that when you're drilling it. So first off, we wanna attack the top arm, all right? So I'm not gonna attack this arm right now, I would attack this one, all right? So switch your arms. So for instance, if this arm is up, then I'm gonna attack this one. Now the way I was taught to do it, you'd grab his wrist, his elbow, and then you get your elbows bent and you start pushing down, pushing, and you get the arm and you continue it from there. Now the problem with that is, if the guy on the bottom is super strong, or if, let's say for instance, as you're doing this and you're almost getting it, he bumps his hips, right? And then you start losing all the progress that you made, okay? So the way I like to do it is, I wanna make sure that my hips are parallel to the arm I'm attacking, right? So right now you see his forearms like this and my hips are like this. I have to change that angle to make sure that my hips are parallel to that forearm. Now, let me show you why that works. This is how it's gonna look. Okay, now, a couple things to note here. Step one, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab by the hand, all right? Kind of like half hand, half wrist, just like this. And then my other hand's gonna go on his elbow. Now, step two, I wanna go do like a hurdler stretch. So if you can put yourself in this kind of position here, where your hips are really low, your right hip is dug into his hip and your left knee is on his other hip, creating a vice between your heel and your left knee, and you can keep your hips low and take your right knee and keep it low as well, then you can do this move. It's just simple kind of hurdler stretch. So step one, I come here. Step two, I go in my hurdler stretch position, just like this. Now, step three, I'm gonna start driving my weight down, lowering my elbows and driving his hand down, all right? Now let me explain why that position is important, because remember one of the second thing I had a problem with is when I was here and he bumps and I have to let go of everything I do. If I come here and I change my position this way, if he bumps now, go ahead, he just brings his own arm down, right? I don't have to abandon all the progress that I've just made. So step one, step two, here. I drive, step three. Now, notice my elbow. My elbow's down on the ground. I'm gonna take my right arm and I'm gonna go underneath his arm, underneath the arm. Now, when I get to this position, I have two options, okay? My first option is to grab my own wrist. My second option, which I prefer, if I can catch it in the timing, is to grab my own knuckles, all right? Wrist versus knuckles. Now, let's cover the first part, the wrist, because sometimes you may not be able to grab your knuckles based upon your own forearm size, the size of your partner's biceps. So let's cover the wrist first. So when I'm covering the wrist, what I'm gonna do for step four is I'm gonna do wrist flexes. So I'm gonna flex both wrists at the same time. Right wrist flexes, left wrist flexes, both at the same time, just like this. And I'm gonna squeeze my bicep to lock everything in. Next step, all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start pulling his hand down the mat, pretending like it's a paintbrush, and I'm gonna start lifting his elbow and make sure the hand goes straight down, just like this, watch. All right? Now, especially if I flex the wrist and do all that, he taps out much quicker, look. Like I hardly had to move before he tapped out. Now, let me explain. One of the reasons why I like, if possible, to grab my own hand, my own knuckles, is because sometimes with the wrist, if the guy's strong, or even if he's not strong, but he's just kind of like, normal strength, he can straighten out his arm, straighten the arm, and we would go to a whole straight arm lock series from here. However, if I go and I grab my own hand, my own knuckles, straighten your arm, he can't straighten it. It's done at this point. And I would finish it the same exact way. So by going over and grabbing your own hand or your own knuckles, just cover your knuckles, your opponent's unable to straighten his arm. Now, be aware that with my legs, I'm creating a vice on his hip between my right heel and my left knee. It's very, very tight here. There's no space. He's not going to be able to move. So again, step one, elbow and wrist. Step two, hurdler stretch and drive. Step three, Right hand's gonna go underneath his arm and grab your own wrist or grab your own knuckles here. And then step 4, all you're gonna do, if it's the wrist, you're flexing and pulling down, raising the elbow while driving the hand down towards the mat. Or if it's your knuckles, you're basically just gonna flex, hold, and try to drive his hand in a diagonal motion like this, almost into his ribs. So here, and then going like this, all right? Now, common mistakes I want you to avoid when you do this is this, right? First common mistake, obviously, if you don't do the hurdler stretch, it kind of defeats the whole purpose. Second thing, when you come here, people are tempted when they do this, even if they do the hurdler stretch, see how my legs are out like this, right? And it's like, I'm getting the guy's arm down, but he's just like a second from putting me in the half guard. So you really have to pay attention. Turn a little bit. Turn. Oh, like this. Look at my legs here. Heel, right in the hip. See how my heel goes right in the hip? And my left knee, it's like on the other side of his hip, and my knee is like down. So I want a lot of tension here. I don't want him to be able to move at all. All right, so that's the main thing. If you neglect this, it's going to be a big problem as far as being able to control your opponent. And then, turn a little more. Next, another mistake people make a lot of times is when they get here, they'll just lift the elbow or they'll pull the arm down. You have to remember, it's the combination of both of those, the lifting and the pulling, that is going to make him tap out. So just keep those things in mind, guys. Normal speed, guys, just like this.